Hello everybody and welcome back to Juno New Origins, where as you will see, we are currently pretty close to the village with the Drew here. I went and got the Drew off camera and brought this most of the way back to the village. Unfortunately, as you can see here, we ran out of battery charge on the way back about 2 kilometers away. Now, we're going downhill right now, and I don't know how far we're going to be able to go just off of coasting. But let's find out. We are not currently attempting to stop any of this momentum, and we shouldn't, to be honest. We want to build up as much as we can, and hopefully we can coast down to the village. Oh, wow, look at that. Actually, yeah, I think we can coast to the village. Beautiful. So that is very, very good. Now the question is, does this scheme actually work? The idea behind the scheme, of course... Oh, this is flipping. Okay. We might be able to go backwards a little bit here and there. We should have built up a little charge while we're doing this. Yeah, you can see very small amounts of charge built up. So we might be able to just boost ourselves up here. I think we're probably out of charge now again. Yeah, we are getting some amount of power flow, though, through these solar panels. I extended these solar panels to get us further, but they broke off on the journey over, which is not surprising. But we can just make our way over here. We are so close to the village now. Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to need to go this direction. You can see we barely have any torque right now because we have very, very low amounts of electrical charge. But I'm hoping that successfully completing this contract will update our save file and make it so that we can properly revert and retry. Now, oddly, I was able to do that when I started up the game here. Are we not within the area? Maybe we need to get closer over here. Okay. We're running on fumes at this point. I'm surprised this hasn't completed. Return the Druid safely to the village is not checked off. They look pretty safe under there, don't they? Okay. Maybe we need to disembark them. I suppose that's a possibility. Okay, I'm braking right now, and we're going to go around this corner. Okay. Oh, we just had to bring it to a halt. I see. Gotcha. Well, there we go. Let's end that flight. Now, I was able to retry and undo when I loaded this save up. I don't know why. I didn't do anything to change that. But I'll take it. So I think the game is working at this point. So we'll recover the craft. And now we do have this hydrolock sphere. So I would very much like to get that working, right? So we need to iterate a little bit on the launcher for that. So the station expander, we need to iterate a bit on this. So first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to, I think, soup up these engines just a little bit. Or actually, it should be the chamber pressure in these engines. I'm going to bump this up to 7,800 kilopascals. So it should be something like that. We could also boost up this nozzle throat size if we really wanted to. I would rather not. But boosting the thrust alone isn't going to do the trick. Another thing we could do is we could swap this over into being liquid-fueled side stages. That would cost us some extra money, and we'd have some overexpansion issues for a bit anyway. But I'm actually curious in trying that. Let's pop these off for right now, and let's put more of these engines here. So this should now be Methalox here, right? Oh, it's on Carolox. Okay, that's fine. We would grab these guys here, and we would have the fuel transfer mode be normal. So now the question is, what's our liftoff thrust weight? Okay, it's too low. So we're definitely going to have to do something about that. I would like to increase the nozzle throat size on these outer areas to 100%. These inner ones, I'm going to leave at 78. But these outers, I'm going to increase the chamber pressure on them up to... Oh, this is on all stages. Hang on. Stage 1. What's the staging looking like? Okay, so this is all of these mage engines, but the interstages are happening simultaneously. That's a very strange thing to do. There we go. 1.75. That makes a lot more sense. So this is now on 10.4 megapascals. 1.75. This is stage 1 is broken again. What did this just do? Why did this move the interstage and the fairing base down here? Okay. Put stage 4 here. Interstage and fairing base can go there. And then the habitation module can be up here. Okay, that's fine. So now stage 1, 2.35. Okay. So if we look at the cost, 109.5 million. So these are very, very expensive at this point. We might want to consider swapping them from being mage engines into being a different type of Carolox specifically engine. So them being Carolox, yeah, we might want to think about that. So we could, instead of having them be mages, we could use Titans. That uses Hydrolox. I think those are too expensive. Keep in mind our budget for this is 100 million. Okay, so this is probably a bit too much here. So let's turn the chamber pressure down on these guys, down to around, what would it look like at about 10 millipascals, or megapascals? 1.74 starting thrust to weight. That's interesting. So this cost would be 82.9. The cost on the pad would be 21.7. So this is just over budget at this point. We could consider dropping down the nozzle throat size to increase the specific impulse of that. And I'd want this to be at altitude of 0. So 1.54 right there. It's not the highest thrust to weight. Okay. So that's absolutely noted. The other thing we could consider doing is still having these be SRBs, but ramping up the Ifrits, or even going to Phoenixes. But I kind of want to see what this feels like. This is slightly over budget, and that is understood. That might be okay. What are the issues? 1 payload of this type, but only 0 payloads are available from active contracts. Oh, we haven't changed the payload. Right. That's something we should definitely do. We need the Hydrolox fuel sphere up here. So that is going to be a significantly wider payload. So we're going to have that be, I believe we determined it should be like 5.5 meters-ish on the fairing. So this can be something like 5.5, and then this guy can be a little taller like this. Okay, so this is going to be heavier, right? Yeah, 1.31 for our starting thrust to weight here. So that's going to be very, very low. I'm going to save this. We're going to need to dial this in a little bit more, but I want to see how this feels. Okay, so we put this out on the pad, and let's immediately think about doing this number. Looks like the contract is working. That's good, and we'll verify soon that and we're going to need to turn our monoprop off. There we go. We're going to verify soon that our reversion is actually working. Well, that's awkward. These are in stage 1. Okay, so it moved around all of our staging. But hey, we could undo an exit. That's a good sign. That's a very good sign. So why did it move around all of this staging? Well, who knows? But for now, I'm going to put a stage in here. We do not want these spirit engines to be in this stage right now. So spirit engines, get out of here. We're going to want this to happen here, and then we're going to want this inner stage to happen here, and it can be something like that. Okay. Now let's see what this feels like. It's going to be really low thrust to weight to start with, but I'm curious to see several factors here. factor number 1, I'm curious to see how this actually ends up, like how far it ends up going. And factor number 2, I'm curious to see if we have that issue that we had before, where we had too little thrust to weight at this stage, but too much thrust to weight before we exit the atmosphere. Okay, so we're seeing some overexpansion damage. We locked target here. That's not what we wanted. Let's retry that. I was going to take a look at the overexpansion, but yeah, I accidentally locked target there. So let's set this to a heading of 60. That'll be fine. A pitch of 70, and let's go. I want to see about this overexpansion. Okay, so that's not a problem on the outer engines. It's only a problem on the inner engines. And we know previously it was 2.1, but it looks like 0.6. I'm not concerned about that. So that looks fine. Let's watch the fuel here. Okay, so this is maxed. So we're pulling exclusively from these outer tanks right now. And you can see that our thrust to weight is kind of on the low side, for sure. There's no doubt about that. But we're doing kind of okay here. In a weird sort of way. So we're still struggling to hold attitude at 70. That's not surprising. We've not really made too much of an effort to do anything with that, although all of these engines can gimbal. So there is that. Our thrust to weight is approaching 2 now. So that's looking reasonably solid. We're almost done with the fuel in our side boosters, as of right now. We've got 25% remaining there. So this is going to accelerate us up decently. We're going to be hitting 20-kilometer apoapsis pretty soon. Just checking internally here. Yeah, that's still at 100% fuel. So that's looking solid. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and there's all of those awkwardly detaching. Wow, that's incredibly awkward. Okay, so that's fine. I want to put us at 45 degrees now. Our thrust to weight is 0.74. Well, that's inauspicious. Okay, so our thrust to weight at this stage is definitely too low. That is 100% understood. We're going to need to get a lot further off of that first stage if we want this to be viable. Our orbital velocity is increasing, but our time to apoapsis isn't looking pretty. The thrust to weight is going to change, of course, and I'm thinking we could put another shell of thrusters around the outside, but that's going to cause us some significant budget issues. We need to decide if that's actually a problem for us or not. We need to ditch this fairing as soon as we can, and I think right now is fine given our current velocities. So we'll ditch that fairing, and that will boost up our thrust to weight somewhat. But we're still struggling to fight gravity at this point. So that means that really we should not be this low. We should be more like 70 degrees right now. We're going to need a lot of vertical momentum here. So that's understood. Our thrust to weight is at 1.0 right now. So across the board, our booster thrust to weight is very low with this hydrolox sphere. That's understood. Yeah, that's definitely understood. So that is fine for right now. Our time to apoapsis it should be maybe slightly increasing at this point. Yeah, but we're going to have an issue with fuel. With this level of thrust to weight, yeah, we're going to have a significant fuel issue. So that's understood. We have good burn times, but our thrust to weight is definitely low. This is an incredibly heavy payload, but even so. So the question is, what do we want to do about it? We're budget constrained, and that's going to cause significant design issues if we if we care about being budget constrained, right? That's the question we need to ask right now, is do we care about being budget constrained, or do we want to just blow the budget? It's certainly an interesting question. We could easily deliver this thing for a higher budget, but for 100 million, this is already over budget, and this does not do the trick. So that is definitely wildly concerning, right? So we need a lot more thrust to weight on this, for sure. I'm sure there are ways that we can get that thrust to weight that are going to be cheaper. Well, option one, we just ditch these, and we swap this over to Phoenixes. Boom. Like that, we are instantly slightly cheaper. Actually, I think that's very similar cost. Hang on. Let's reload this quick. 84.9, 83. That's actually more expensive. 9.2 for each of these. Okay, I guess it's because the chamber pressure is low. Sure. Well, we could boost up the chamber pressure up to maximum. This is blowing our budget, of course. And we can increase the chamber pressure here up to around 10 megapascals. So something like this. This is, of course, a budgetary problem. But what if we took this from 6 boosters down to 4 or 5? Something like this. So this is still a little over budget, but I'm wondering what the thrust to weights and burn times feel like this. We're gonna have a little lower burn time, and our staging is messed up. Okay, we're gonna have a little lower burn time for sure. No doubt about that. And let's grab this. The fuel sphere is going to be all the way up here. I don't know why it really likes to move the fuel sphere into stage 1, but whatever. There we go. Something like this. Now, I want to turn off the monoprop. There we go. And we'll set this at 70 and a heading of... Why is this going westerly? Okay, let's have this be a heading of 60 degrees. There we go. Initial thrust to weight is ramping up to 1.75 to start with. Understood. No overexpansion damage now. So there's that. Checking fuel. Okay, so we can see that 4 is not enough to fully flow the fuel. That's maybe okay, though. Not that big of a concern, as long as our thrust to weights are significantly better. What's our overall delta V in this? Yep, our DV is really not enough. We could extend these tanks up somewhat, potentially. I feel like we have some delta V headroom here. But we're going to run, or rather some thrust to weight headroom, I should say. But we're going to be running out of fuel in these side tanks very shortly. I do wish fuel transfer was a little better than this. But alas, that's the best we've got. Okay, side tanks going away in the most awkward fashion known to man. So that looks good. I'm going to keep our apoapsis pretty high here. You can see time to apoapsis decreasing. We're still only at about 1 thrust to weight here. This is definitely better thrust to weight, but it's not ideal. If we're going to be traveling this slowly, do we ever need a fairing? This might be a lot of wasted mass. So that's 5 tons, that's another 4 tons, and that's like 2 tons. So this is like 11 tons of mass up here. We could potentially shed that. So that would definitely boost up our efficiency. But even so, we're going to have some significant issues with this. So we're currently at about 60 kilometers. I'm going to bring this down to 45. Our thrust to weight is marginal at this point. It's not phenomenal, but it is certainly marginal. We need a whole lot of additional delta V in the horizontal velocity, though. That's going to be our main concern at this point. We're getting our verticality okay. The verticality is no problem. It's that horizontal velocity that is causing us significant issues at this moment. So that's all understood. And there's large amounts of drag up here as well. So that is also a thing. You can see here our apoapsis is going to be hitting just about 80, and that's fine, but we need another like 2 kilometers per second or so in this. So that's an argument for having more side boosters, right? No doubt about that. And also potentially taller side boosters. So we could just say, screw it, we don't care about the budget, and this is already 10 million over budget, right? So I think that's exactly what I'm going to say. I'm going to undo an exit. There we go. I'm so glad that's working now. So I'm going to say, screw it, we don't care so much about the budget. It's not that big of a deal anyway, and I'm going to extend these tanks up to be about there. And what is this thrust to weight looking like at this point? Also, hang on. These don't have fuel in them. We can definitely have those have fuel in them. Cool. So at this point, this isn't that over budget, but it's a little over budget. 1.6 starting thrust to weight. That's actually a decent starting thrust to weight. And the ending thrust to weight is, well, you know, not amazing, but 5.74 here. So we're going to have much better burn times with the additional fuel. 1.6 thrust to weight is what I usually target in KSP for off the pad thrust to weight. So that's not too shabby in general. Let's see what it feels like in this game, though. So a heading of 60 degrees, a pitch of 70, and let's see how that feels. So off we go. And we can keep an eye on our fuel drain out over this way. So this is 91. This should be remaining at 100% fuel because we're pulling entirely from these outer tanks at this time. So that's looking good. We managed to make a profit on the last 2 missions to expand the station. So I'm fine with taking a small loss on this one, I think. That's not a big concern. So that's about a third of the fuel at this point drained out of these booster tanks. And we can keep an eye on our overall orbital velocity here. And with this additional thrust to weight and burn time, we may require the fairing. That's something that I may consider dropping soon. But for the moment, I think having the fairing is reasonably useful. So our apoapsis is looking okay. Let's try a 45-degree pitch here. Thrust to weight is chilling at about 2.9. Not bad here, actually. About 20% fuel remaining in these side tanks. So keep in mind, we're going to have pretty low thrust to weight when these side tanks are burned out. We can expand the size of them somewhat if we feel like we need to. We would expand their radius at this point. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and... Okay, side tanks are dry. Let's ditch them. And you can see thrust to weight, actually 0.97. That's not bad. At this point, I want to be getting purely horizontal speed. And I think we're going fast enough and we're low enough that the fairing is still useful for now. Although, I think at this point, maybe not. Let's ditch the fairing. That'll boost our thrust to weight and our overall efficiency. And we just need a lot of lateral momentum at this point. You can see our time to apoapsis is decreasing, but we'll see how close we get to orbital velocity here. This is still low thrust to weight at this stage. We could consider ramping up the power of these engines somewhat. And that may not be a bad idea. So we see we've got another roughly 85 seconds of burn time. Time to apoapsis is dropping, which is deeply unsurprising. We need to get ourselves roughly 1.7 more, or not 1.7, 24 more kilometers per second. We've got 900 in this. So this stage, still not quite what we need, but it's getting much, much closer at this point. Let's see where this puts us. So we may not want to be burning quite this low either. The apoapsis is still only 89. I'm going to put us at a 5-degree pitch here and see about raising up this time to apoapsis, because we're going to need it. Okay, so that didn't start raising the apoapsis, but that did slow it down. Let's try a 10-degree pitch. Okay, it's holding at 32. Still going down. 15-degree pitch it is. Okay, 32, 33. Beautiful. It's going up. I want to continue to burn here until this stage is burned out. I want to push out that apoapsis quite a lot, because we're going to need it if we want to get this thing into orbit. We're a long ways away from orbital velocity, unfortunately. We're about 600 meters per second away. Now we've got 600, well, actually we've got about 800 meters per second in this. So this is a very, very heavy payload, right? And that significantly brings it down. So we're going to need to ramp up the power of that first stage. There's no doubt about that, by about 600 meters per second or so. So we can pull that back, and a couple of things that we can do. Thing one, I want to try it without the fairing and see what happens. That'll propel us a decent amount of additional distance. I also want to crank this up to maybe around 12 millipascals, not millipascals, megapascals. And we'll see what that ends up feeling like as well. Let's do a quick test of that. And I'm going to do this in 2x because it is time to put a cut in here, but I want to see what this feels like. So we're going to do this. We may require the fairing, and if so, we'll find that out pretty quickly. But let's just go ahead and launch this and do it in 2x. Here we go. And this should drain faster, but our overall thrust to weight, as you can see, will be a fair amount higher. And this will propel us through the atmosphere faster, which will cause us to have, in theory, less drag. And also the less mass up here. So we'll see what that feels like, but this may be too much for the hydrolox sphere to handle. We will see. Okay, so current apoapsis is looking good. Let's put this at about a 45-degree angle. We've still got about a third fuel on these side tanks. So we'll continue to burn here for the moment. Okay, definitely seeing heat build up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0 on the side tanks. Detaching them. Beautiful. Okay, so the apoapsis is looking pretty good. In fact, the apoapsis is a little overbuilt at this point. So 1.28 kilometers per second. We overshot the apoapsis. We can dial that in a little bit in terms of... apoapsis height. We're a little higher than I want to be on the apoapsis, so we've put a little too much into verticality there on that ascent, but this is looking semi-reasonable. If we targeted 150, what would we need to get into orbit from here? Okay, engine shutdown at 150. And this would end up being, at the apoapsis, we would bring this around, and we would need a lot, is the answer. Okay, so this is going to be somewhere around 950 meters per second. Yeah. Okay, that's definitely going to need to be dialed in a bit. So that is noted, and we can pull this back. We're going to need to work on that a little bit more. That's fine. We're not surprised about that. There's a little more fuel we can toss in up here if we don't have to worry about the fairing, and that's definitely one thing that we can do. We can also expand the size of these tanks a little bit by taking this off and expanding this up to be like 2-meter radius or so. Repositioning these fins, ideally. It doesn't seem to want to. Fins? There we go. So repositioning this fin and repositioning this fin. And then we would move these guys back up. So this is a fair amount of additional fuel. This is going to cause some potential thrust to weight issues. Yeah, 1.13. But we can dial that in. That's fine. It is time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and next episode, we're going to get that dialed in, we'll get this thing lifted, it'll be fine. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Andy McGar, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Xenocyte, Hiro Marutsu, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.